So with Moody's latest move, the U.S. has lost all of its perfect AAA credit ratings. Two other ratings agencies had made similar moves earlier. Fitch cut the U.S. rating to AA plus back in 2023. S&P was the first to move. That was back in 2021. So as we mentioned, Moody citing concerns about the nation's growing debt pile for making the move, which brings us to our big number this morning. 36, as in trillion, as in dollars. That is the size of the U.S. debt right now. Now, the number could grow further, and which is why Moody's is worried. U.S. lawmakers are working on a huge tax and spend bill that's expected to add trillions of dollars to the federal debt over the coming years. Now, in terms of reaction, we showed you futures earlier on. Take a look at treasuries. And this is interesting. Right on the back of that move, we barely had much movement at all, about a 5 basis point edging up in the 10, the benchmark. Right now, the 10 is at 444.5, call it. The short end, 2's at 399.31. But, Sherry, you know, it all comes down to this. $36 trillion. Congress is fighting over this bill right now. They're having a hard time, including from their own people, Republicans, right? And I think the big question is, Scott Bessent, his solution is, look, we're going to cut spending. We're going to grow the economy. We'll grow our way out of this debt problem.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So will they have to print more? Will they have to inflate it away? I think that is really the question. And here's another big number, although it is a lot smaller than $36 trillion, which is $9 trillion. That is the amount that the U.S. have to finance this year alone. So it's coming up fast. Obviously, we're going to be facing a lot of demand shock out there. What does countries like, I don't know, China, Japan, the top holders of U.S. Treasuries, what do they end up doing?
Yeah.
Do they sell? And are they selling because of tariff-related retaliation?
Yeah.
Can the U.S. really blame them?
So interesting you should mention that, because March data for U.S. Treasury holdings just came out over the weekend, right? Now, do we have those graphics? Let's bring it up and take a look. Now, this is lagging again, right? But for March, right, foreign ownership of U.S. Treasuries was at a record high, $90.5 trillion, right? Foreign ownership was up 12% for that month. Now, the thing is, this is lagging historical data. What happens in April?
Yeah,
right? Because
so compare
we have the Rose Garden.
Yeah, compare March
right?
and April.
And what's really interesting is, there you go, the top holders. Japan is back at #1 spot. Guess who's #2? Not China.
UK.
It's the UK. Right? The U.S. is a good ally of the U.K., and this is usually, these are custodial funds, so it's essentially a proxy for hedge funds.
Yeah.
And then China is at #3. But what happens in April? That'll be interesting.
Yeah, and I think, sure, if it's trade related, if it's a tariff negotiation related, I get it. But did we not really see this coming? I mean, Ray Dalio, for example, has been on this case. Yeah. I mean, the last time I was in Singapore, he was talking about that. Remember, CNBC Converge Live, and that was what he was talking about, the death spiral of U.S. debt problem. Creditors understand, perhaps, that the U.S. will never end up paying for it. So again, going back to the demand shock. And what else is interesting? What happened over the weekend, just yesterday overnight? Crypto reacted to it.
Take a look at the pricing.
Yeah, because, I mean, there was some resistance, so they jumped out of nowhere. I mean, not out of nowhere, and Bitcoiners will hate it when I say that. Yeah. But they actually jumped and then hit some resistance, and so they calmed down a little bit. But there was certainly that move, and that is a conversation in the crypto space. Yeah, and 105 is what we're seeing. There we go. Because the conversation in the crypto space is that they're getting a bounce, Bitcoin will get a bounce, because of the conversation around the U.S. dollar seen as a inflationary asset. The Fed is going to have to print more money. That amplifies the attractiveness, the arguments, the merits for Bitcoin. So that is quite interesting.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. And I also found it interesting that, it's not just Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent shrugging off at Moody's cut, the president himself as well, right? And then what does he do? He turns around and he starts laying into Jay Powell again. Yeah. and posting on social media. Do we have that? There we go. The consensus of almost everybody, the president says, is that the Fed should cut rates sooner rather than later. And then he goes on, and there's that nickname again, Too Late Powell, a man legendary for being too late, will probably blow it again. But who knows?
Can we just tie the two together? That the fact that Trump is surrounding himself with crypto enthusiasts.
Oh, yeah.
So, I don't know. There might be something there.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And I think there is a point that in calling Mr. Powell Mr. Too Late, because maybe he does have to print money.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether it's a lateness issue. It's more, the guy's hands are tied right now. I'm not sure what he can do, really, even if he wanted to. But anyway.